Hello and welcome to another episode of Laptop Retrospective. This is Think Design Stories. In this series, we will be going behind the scenes on one of the most iconic laptop brands ever conceived and is still going strong. Today I am joined by David Hill, who started with IBM in 1985 and was with them until May 2005 when the IBM ThinkPad division was purchased by Lenovo. Since then, David has held several positions between those two companies, including the Executive Director of Design, the Vice President of Corporate Identity and Design, and the Chief Design Officer and Vice President of Experience Design. When it comes to ThinkPads, there are few people that know more than he does. Many of us have heard the phrase, dare to be different, or try something new. But when you have something that does not really need to be improved, sometimes defending that can be incredibly difficult. When David Hill stepped into a new position at IBM that included ThinkPad, challenges already awaited him. I'm not a designer, but every time I talk to you, I feel like I get a little bit closer. But what is Purposeful Evolution, and how did you use this with Richard Sapper to envision what ThinkPad would be and what it is?
Well, it really goes back to when I first took the job to lead the design for IBM's personal computer business. I previously was running the design for IBM's mid-range computer division, which at the time was called the AS400 division. And we had some very successful design launches and revamped the whole product line and turned these things into these super powerful looking black computers, all of this. And I get tapped on the shoulder to come do the same kind of thing for the personal computer business. And so I met with the head of marketing in Somers, and I also met with Rick Thoman, who at the time was the general manager for the entire personal computer business. And he told me right off, he said, I sure hope you're the guy for the job, because I just got to tell you, ThinkPad is great, but the desktop stuff, it looks like the rejects from a Russian electronics show. You got to help me. I was like looking at him like, okay, don't hold back. And he just went on and on and on about how horrible they were. They had no design to them. They looked like third-tier players. They had all these different brands. They had a lower-cost brand, a server brand, and everything looked different. And everybody was kind of doing their own thing, and they had different keyboards, different mice. And it was just a mess. And I had a lot of people telling me I was crazy for taking this job, because this is the job that, what are you going to do after they fire you? It was kind of like, okay, well, we'll see. So I energized the whole project to kind of revamp the whole desktop design. We worked on the processors, the keyboards, the mice, speakers, monitors, everything. We redid everything. But at the time, my feeling with regard to ThinkPad was, first off, I had my hands full with desktop. And ThinkPad for me was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And these things were great. They were a wonderful Richard Sapper design concept that had been turned into reality. This simple little black box and the red dot and the color screen and the simple, pure geometry, very Germanic. And I thought, well, those things are just great. And so I had a meeting with because I had to meet with everybody who ran a portion of the business. So I met with the guy who was running the design, or he was the general manager of ThinkPad. Actually, Steve Ward, who eventually became the CEO of Lenovo after the acquisition. And I brought him in the design studio and I showed him all of the new ThinkPads that we were working on at the time. And instead of making this giant design dog and pony show, which I was doing for desktop, and we had rooms full of models, doing research worldwide, and I had teams flying in from Scotland and Japan and Germany. It was a huge project. But ThinkPad, I had like these 5 or 6 ThinkPads on a white table and just showed it to him. And he looked at it and he said, okay, so this is kind of like ThinkPad, the last generation. I said, yeah, it's thinner and it's got more powerful processors, obviously. And we've made a few little improvements to it, and I explained what those were. And he looked at me and said, okay, well, I think it's time for something new. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I think we need a new design. And I asked him, I said, why do you think that? And he said, well, I go to these launches and I don't really have much to say about the design. I talk about the speeds and the feeds and the prices and the size of the screen and all this. It comes to the design, I just have to say, it's a black box, kind of like it was last year. And I said, okay. Yeah. So he said, I want to come back for you in 90 days. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm in big trouble. Because not only did I have this huge monkey on my back for desktop with Rick Thoman breathing down my neck, telling me that, I've got to reinvent the whole world and hit all these deadlines. And I'm talking hundreds of products made in different countries with, monitors and keyboards, mice and speakers. It's unbelievable. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So I had a meeting with my manager that just happened to be that week. And I told him about it. And I said, what do you think about all that? And he said, ignore him. He said, he's wrong. Just ignore him. I've got your back. And oh, by the way, he's not going to be there for much longer anyway. So just ignore it. Said, okay. If you've got my back, I'm in, because I don't think there's any problem. Neither do I. What's next? I just stopped. I said, oh, wow, this is amazing. And literally a week later, it was announced he had a new job. And I was like, yes. the end of that. And then I thought to myself, well, this could happen again. There could be maybe the new guy doesn't get it, or maybe the new guy has been briefed by him that he wants a new design and explain why. And I'm thinking, wow, we got to go on the offense. We really got to go on the offense. We can't just make these designs and show it to them as a fait accompli. We have to go on the offense. So I felt that we should have a meeting to describe and take the upper level management through this concept of purposeful evolution, that was going to be our shtick. This brand would be known for that. Like we don't change it every year. It's like the Volkswagen of the 1960s. Every year it kind of looks like a Volkswagen Beetle, and they would explain, here are the 27 things that are different between a 1969 and a 1970. Go ahead and try to find them. Like, that kind of thing. And I thought, okay, so we pulled together a meeting and we kind of took them through that whole idea and how we felt that the design continued to win awards and accolades, and we could leverage this to our advantage. And we could call out our competitors by saying they actually disadvantaged themselves by making a new design every year, because they can make mistakes. Whereas we build everything off of the original foundation. So each generation, it gets better and better and better and better and better. Whereas they go like, oh, this one was good, and the next one, oh, that was kind of stupid, and they get over here. It's like you never know what it's going to be. I don't remember brand for like compact Presario, I think it was. It was every year. It was like, how horrible is the new Presario going to be? I mean, you sort of waited with bated breath to see this thing, because it was usually some atrocity that it was bigger than it needed to be because it was all swoopy and weird shapes and and all this. So our whole thing was based on purposeful evolution, which means that if it changes, it's for a reason. And the ThinkPad, especially because of the name Think in it, is the thinking person's computer. So there's thought that's gone into it. So when we do something, we have rationale behind it. So it's a rational design. It's not a emotional, sort of crazy thing. It generates emotion because people like it. I mean, if you get it, you fall in love with it. Everything's sort of in the right place. Why is ThinkPad square? Well, if it wasn't square, it would be bigger than it has to be because everything inside of it is square. So we we would just push it. So we took the management through this whole thing, and they bought it. And then every once in a while, you'd have to kind of push the genie back in the bottle, as someone would say, "Hey, maybe we ought to come up with something new this year." So we would play around with certain things like the audio buttons every year a little bit when the new generation came out. We'd try to come up with, is there a better way to do that? Or things like, I've already talked about things like the mute microphone button and rearranging the lights a little bit and things like this. So we would try to make things we could talk about, much like the way Volkswagen would talk about something, like making the rear window a little bigger so you could see out of it. And it kind of snowballs after a while. After you've done this for 5 generations, 6 generations, 7 generations, 8 generations, it's kind of like, well, you really can't change it now because it would be really, really hard to do. And there'd be people out in the front yard with torches and pitchforks. You would disenfranchise your whole brand because for 10 years you've told people that ThinkPads are black and square and have a red track point in the middle and have a great keyboard. Now what are you going to say? We decided that was stupid. So it's the brand and the design are like this. You really can't extract them from each other. And so really what we did was we turned from trying to have a defensive posture to using it as an offense. That it was, this is what we do and why we do it, not just to sit back and wait for somebody to say, well, how come they're black again? Is that the only color you've got back there? Like that's kind of the story. And it's the same story, actually. There are many products over the years that have existed like this. The Volkswagen Beetle is obviously a huge one. The Porsche 911 is one I've used as an example many, many times. It always has the same spirit. It's not exactly the same because you can't put a car with 400 horsepower in a chassis that's tiny because there's not enough room with the big tires. That's why a Porsche today is much larger than they used to be because it's got twice as much horsepower and the tires are bigger and it goes on and on and on. There's legal issues, obviously, with cars also, like the inclination of the front of the car or the windshield, like a Jeep. A Jeep used to be, the front was completely dead vertical, but it can't be anymore. And it's not because designers decided that dead vertical didn't look right. It's because they couldn't do it. But I would make it dead vertical if I could, and I'm sure they would too. But those things get in the way. Nobody's going to buy a Jeep without air conditioning. The originals didn't have air conditioning. Didn't have seat belts. But it makes you think that you're in a Jeep and you're going to go liberate Europe.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I like your analogy of the Jeep because the spirit of it is really important. I've actually had the opportunity to ride in a vintage Jeep, and it is genuinely uncomfortable. Like, it is not a pleasant experience, but you have this idea that it's this
Yeah.
amazing machine, and it is,
Hmm.
but not in the way that a modern context would necessarily interpret it,
No, it's not a vehicle about creature comfort. It's a
Mhm.
vehicle that instills this emotion or this feeling in your persona that you are doing something big. You're like unstoppable, or oh, those people driving those little sports cars, they don't get it. I can go anywhere. You can't stop me. It's a completely different thing, and it's rooted in what a Jeep is. And a ThinkPad, I think, has a lot of those characteristics. It makes you think that you are somebody and you're doing something important, and that the machine is not going to let you down. That it's going to help you to do that. And I think a lot of that is because of the design, and the purposeful evolution is part of it. It's part of, when you buy one, you're not buying this year's ThinkPad. You're buying almost 30 years of ThinkPad knowledge. That's what you're buying. It's this accumulation of knowledge. That's a big advantage.